Florida State on the field, looking to get better each and every day. We are as well here on FSU Seminoles Live, edition number 205. If I do the math right, that's just about 4 years of Florida State coverage here at the Voice of College Football, thanks to these guys. Logan Robinson, Noel Game Day, of course. We got big game James Coleman, Florida State fullback, 2002 to 5. And, of course, Den Media Group right here on YouTube. We will point you in that direction. And, of course, Chris Frazier joins us as well. We appreciate Chris being here from Spearatics. Boys, how we doing tonight?
Good.
Doing great.
I was pumped up immediately, regardless of what was going on today, when I saw that all three of these guys were showing up for the show, because this is going to be phenomenal. You get three Florida State brains in the crowd, and we're in good shape. Logan, start us out with spring practice. The players took spring break off, but they are back at it.
They had practice yesterday afternoon, had a good spring break. Everybody made it back safely, and Florida State still keeping the pads on. And Mike seemed pretty pleased with how practice went overall, listening to the interview, but then, mentioned they'd like to see a little bit more tempo and the way that they're running some of their drills. And that's fine. You come back from spring break, guys, a little, I wouldn't say rusty, but recovering in a lot of ways. Kind of expected, but still overall, he was mentioning a few players that stood out to him. And I think one that stood out to all of us, and including James, whenever he was in attendance for it early on in spring camp, it's going to be Vandrevius Jacobs, a true freshman wide receiver. He flashed early on to me, and I was like, who in the heck is in number 19? Because number 19, the only number that I remember that from is Roberto Aguayo. And I'm like, well, who's over there playing wide receiver? And sure enough, that's Vandrevius Jacobs. He's kind of a guy that has consistently flashed all throughout camp so far. And yes, we're only a little ways in. We're going into a week and a half tomorrow when the guys return out to practice on Thursday afternoon. But to see him go against some really good competition, including Virginia cornerback transfer Fentrell Cypress, one of the top transfers in the country, to see him be able to compete and also make some grabs on top of him is something to like. And then, of course, I know FSU Twitter and everybody will freak out. Well, it was Fentrell Cypress. What's going on there? I like bringing up Greedy Vance in this kind of scenario. Last spring, Greedy Vance was getting beat left and right on routes, and it took him a little while to get into a rhythm going into fall camp. And then you saw what he did during the season, being your leader in interceptions. So not at all worried about Fentrell, but to more importance to see Vandrevius Jacobs make this jump kind of early on in camp is something more fun to watch, because there's no games coming up. You only have a Seminole showcase, which is not even a game. If any of you have been at Doak, and Mike does not run a Garnet and Gold game, it is a showcase. It's named that for a reason. But for Vandrevius to kind of get acclimated and get down the playbook, along with Hakeem Williams also having a good day yesterday. On Tuesday, it shows, guys getting into it and getting the playbook down and little things here and there. James can have better comment on that as being a former player, but I'm very high on Vandrevius Jacobs. I think of his situation being where Malik McLean was his freshman spring, where he started making moves, and then I can't wait to hear about the scrimmage coming up on Saturday, which we'll talk about later. But I want to see if he kind of takes that McLean role like he did his freshman year, and we're going to see a lot of production, or at least a lot of playing time out of Vandrevius Jacobs in this 2023 season.
James, what you got for us?
Yeah, I agree. It's Tuesday after spring break is very difficult to kind of come in and get back in the swing of things. Conditioning is a little bit off. Rightfully so. You've been partying, probably doing some things that I'm not going to accuse them of doing, but I was in college once, so I understand it. Even if you traveled home, getting back into the swing of things, which is why we did it 1 year when I was at Florida State. Coach Bowden didn't really like he wanted to get spring break over with. We had spring break was right after mat drills. When mat drills ended, then we started spring ball for most of the times. But but based on what they did before they left, and based on what and really this Saturday is really people are going to start separating themselves, and when you're going to see, okay, well, maybe I was too high on this guy, maybe I wasn't. Some people play better when the lights are on, and the way Mike conducts his scrimmages are very intense, and a lot of pressure putting on game situations. But when we look at losing effectively Michael Pittman with the hip injury, you want to see your Winston Wrights, you want to see your Jacobs, and also when you think about who you truly lost with Pookie, the wide receiver, wide receiver was a big play threat, was your explosive guy. That's where Winston Wright, that's where Jacobs come in. Hakeem can come in and play a Michael Pittman role early on, and that's kind of just the way things kind of go. But the bigger thing is, again, is what we're listening to and hearing out of Keziah Holmes, and who's going to be that running back that's going to step up and take Trayshawn Ward's spot. And then defensively, like, we've been hearing nothing but great things about Darrell Jackson. So we need to get that waiver before we can get overly excited about him. But it's still good to be able to know that you have this piece there for you.
Chris, your take.
I'm wondering about the offensive line personally. I know that the week before last, there was a little bit of sluggish play from the offensive line. And I know they've been trying Casey out at center, and he probably didn't have his greatest practice, the last practice at the end of the week there. And I'm just kind of curious, if they leave Mo at center and you push Casey to guard, and then you push Robert Scott to tackle. And to me, that sounds like a pretty damn good left side. Just wondering if Casey doesn't progress well at the center position. I know he's trying it out. I know that, Quayshawn Sapp's also pushing to try to play some this year as far as center goes. But going with the most experience, I'm assuming we stick with Mo. And then I think Casey gets pushed over to the guard, and then Scott gets pushed over to the tackle position. But a lot of people are wondering if that's a bad thing, and I think it's actually a good thing. If you got those two big bodies on that left side, that's a hell of a strong side that you can run on. So moving to, there was a question on YouTube about who's going to replace Pittman. I don't know if you replace Pittman, especially on the blocking aspect of things, but I don't think anyone's disappointed in what Winston Wright's been able to do with the short time that he's been back. I also think that who Logan's bringing up and Jacobs, I mean, a lot of us kind of felt that Jacobs was going to be something special quick, maybe not this quick. So it's good to hear from Logan's side that everyone's high on Jacobs coming in and what he's been able to do.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Chris, because I'm covering like 15 teams. So when stuff happens, it's like, okay, I'm going to bring this up the next time we come around with this show. And then, like 58 other things happen. And Micah Pittman was off my radar. So obviously that happened just here in the last, week to 10 days. And he's not projected to be back until early to mid season. So how do you guys project the pecking order and guys taking those opportunities? Logan mentions Jacob, so obviously that's an opportunity for him. Is there anybody else that you think can slide in?
I think one of the most athletic wide receivers on Florida State's unit for Ron Dugan's is Darian Williamson. I think he's kind of a mix of a hybrid guy. You can put him on the outside if need be, but I'd like to see him in the slot. That's someone Mike Norvell commented on last night after practice. I really do think that he's special, and Mike Norvell cannot stop talking about him. He started talking about him after tour of duty, started talking about him during our press conference going into spring camp, and just watching him at practice, it shows. The biggest thing, though, that has hurt him is injuries and not being able to consistently get onto the field and see playing time. But when he does, you could see him connect very well with Jordan Travis. But I'd go Darian Williamson. I'd say Winston Wright, but I'm still not 100% yet that he's at 100%. And that's fine. It's only the spring, and this is the most that we're seeing out of him thus far. But you could throw in Winston right in there. He'd be kind of there behind Darian, in my opinion, just because he's getting still acclimated and getting fine with that leg. And then, like I said, Vandrevius Jacobs, if he can move into that role, like McLean, two different bodies, two different type of players, yeah. But I'm impressed to see. I was impressed how McLean got into getting early playing time, and that was big because he was blocking. I want to see. It's cool to go and make those grabs, but in Mike Norvell's offense, definitely the wide receiver position, you've got to block. And if you want to get on the field earlier, you want to get more playing time, you've got to block. So that's something Vandrevius Jacobs is going to have to do. And in order to do that too, he's going to have a big offseason putting on some size just to help him in that department. I think overall, though, we don't need him to gain so much weight to make grabs or do all this kind of acrobatic stuff. He's already doing that. But in order to play from under Mike Norvell's offense, you're going to have to block. And so that's something Vandrevius is going to have to do, and we'll see if he can develop in that case. But I think Darian Williamson by far has a strong potential, and there's a reason why he did not enter the transfer portal.
Yeah,
Daniel, go ahead, James.
They have a big they like him, but I think the person that probably fits Pittman more, and nobody's talking about, we joke and call him Megamon. He's got he's got a big forehead. But he's a phenomenally explosive wide receiver. He's 5'9", 193. So if Michael Pittman was 5'10", 203. So you're looking at body types. And that'd be Ja'Kai Douglas. And Ja'Kai Douglas is a kid who, if we remember Notre Dame, once he gets behind, if you get him matched up on a nickel corner or even mess around and catch him in a linebacker situation, he's going to be able to cause mismatches. But what we got to think about, what Pittman was really here for, he was like a second running back. He was like a guy who can actually block, and probably who will end up doing it in the season. You know, we looking at him as a tight end, but we'll probably bring in Jaheim Bell. That's probably who's going to end up playing that position. I think Mike is a Y anyway, so he's going to end up playing that Y position for him anyway.
Yeah, Ja'Kai made some plays last year. 10 catches for $123. Had a nice day against Georgia Tech. 4 receptions, 63 yards, and a touchdown. And also had a touchdown reception against Clemson last year, 6-yarder. So he's already made some, an impact in some meaningful games in the ACC. So good things out of him. Ja'Kai. One thing hit me when Logan first mentioned Jacobs. That's a question for you, James, is that when you're on that field, and I know this wears off at some point, but early on in practice, the first time you're going up against guys that either the 5-star sees that he's going up against the 2-star or the walk-on or vice versa, that it's in your head a little bit. I'm asking, what this guy is supposed to be. Now, once guys start popping pads and you find out who can really play, regardless of what they were ranked, then I'm sure that goes all out the window. But your first impressions on the field, kind of knowing what these dudes are supposed to be based on their ratings.
Really, I think, you have more high hopes for guys who are higher rated, but you really try to throw away those ratings. I'll give our beat and everybody pretty good props on not just going over and trying to fabricate things that they're seeing with Akeem Williams. Sometimes guys just want to push something. Like last year, trying to push that there was a quarterback competition. I'm like, if you've stepped on this field, there is no quarterback competition. I don't care how much I want this kid to be great. He's just not. He's not Jay Trav. But there are qualities, like you said, that you can see. When I watch highlight films, I tell guys, especially skill players, if you're not separating from high school kids, you won't separate from college guys. So when you look at Jacobs' film and even Keem, like I saw somebody say Keem was slow, and my challenge was present the film where he's not separating from people, because all I see is a guy getting 10 catches for like 250 yards. That's not, you can't be slow and do that. But, it doesn't matter who they're going up against if you can see they're truly dominating. Even Rodney Hill will be a guy that I wasn't as high on at first until that first day of practice last spring. But I give him, but to his credit, his highlight film showed him separating from the competition in which he was playing. So that if I can see that, then that at least lets me know you have the skill set that's necessary to be on a Division I level. Now, it's about coming in and being in shape, knowing the playbook, and knowing how to execute within the parameters of what the offense or the defense is set up for you once you get into camp.
So, Chris, you brought up the offensive line. Is there anything else out there? And it may just be more offensive line talk in terms of feeling better about this team a month from now after the spring game than you do now?
I think with repetition and, some of the newcomers like Casey Roddick and a few others, the guy from UTEP and some others, once they get repetition, they start really learning the playbook. Mike Norvell with the system, we like to pull tackles, we like to pull guards for a lot of the RPO stuff, and they're just not used to it yet. So there's a little bit of slug, in my opinion. There's a little bit of sluggish play there because it's not just secondhand nature to make that move. So I think with repetition they'll end up being fine. I'm more excited about the offensive line this year than I have been in the past 10 years because of the amount of depth that we have. So I don't think there's anything to worry about as offensive line goes. I think we'll end up being more than fine. So I'm just excited for them to get the repetition in and become one unit.
I think I'm benefiting like $2 minus the 30 or 40% from YouTube just because FSU was able to win a bowl game against Michigan. That's why Ohio State fan here, Daniel, chimes in with the congratulations on a 6-year-old bowl win in the Orange Bowl. And of course, you guys wanted to see Florida State in the Orange Bowl this past season. If they get there this year, I think that's going to be a college football playoff game. So definitely would like to get there coming up here in 23. Comment in the chat about Miami transfer Daryl Jackson. Have you guys been able to catch anything that would lead you to believe anything good or bad about his progress?
I'd say the first thing really came in shape. You always evaluate guys when they're coming in and seeing, well, are they in good physical shape here and there? And Daryl Jackson's in shape, and it goes to show on the field. And I think, too, for Florida State, I love watching OL versus DO. Those are my favorite drills. That's where we really got to see some guys flash, like Patrick Payton, and, of course, Jared Verse absolutely eliminate a few tackles this last spring. And I think for Daryl Jackson specifically, I think he's kind of got a little step ahead because of what Florida State's trying to figure out on the offensive line, definitely in the interior, with some of these transfers coming around, and then also too trying to evaluate. Coach Atkins is trying to figure out where pieces go left and right. But once they get the rhythm going, it'll be much of an easier or a better battle between the DL and the OL. But yeah, Daryl Jackson looks the part, and I think Florida State, having him lined up to Fabo, and definitely a few others like Joshua Farmer, who continues to shine and make strides left and right. It helps a ton whenever you get a fully healthy Fisk back too. It was crazy to see him, Mike Norvell having that race every practice, and then to see just another guy that's in shape is Braden Fisk, the Western Michigan defensive tackle transfer. So Florida State, depending on the waiver, like James said, and we won't get too excited from an outlet side of things on them until that waiver's approved and we'll be able to see him out on the field. But every part of it shows that, Odell Haggins and what Adam Fuller and Mike Norvell, what they were able to do in that transfer portal, grabbing him was big. Also shout out to my guy, Corey Fuller, as always. There's always a need definitely in the trenches, but more than ever, in my opinion, off of what Florida State, one of the things they lacked the most was that interior run game defense. It was atrocious whenever Fabian Lovett would go out of the game, and that just can't happen. And if you're shooting to go for an ACC championship, you're going to have, and if you want to win an ACC championship, you're going to have to beat Clemson. And guess who you're going to have to stop that you haven't been able to stop 2 times in a row? Will Shipley. You haven't. You have not been able to stop him. So Florida State's, either if there's going to be an injury in the season, that shouldn't be an excuse. You've got to have guys that step up and make the case. And in my opinion, Jared Jackson was a letdown last year. I think too, health didn't help him much, but there was still a lot more coaching that I saw that had to be done. And there's a reason why he hit the transfer portal. And you didn't also see a tweet from Mike Norvell giving him some praise and going to his next stop. So there's a lot that Florida State's got to do to get better if they want to make a run. There's differences in football teams. There's differences if you want to win some games, you want to win 8, 9, 10, cool and all that. But if you want to make a run, you go to ACC championship, win that, then you got to go to a playoff, win another game. It's all about staying healthy, and you've got to fix some things that hurt you in the last season where you had a successful season. So Darrell Jackson, a nice addition so far. We'll see what that waiver looks like. But yeah, that's a big boy and came in shape very well.
Yeah, because I got to think that not that there are many concerns or major concerns for this team, but the last thing we saw was Oklahoma beating them up a little bit on the ground.
Yeah. Yeah, and Fabian Lovett did not dress that game either. So, you got to see more from a few guys. And, if Malcolm Ray can stay fully healthy for a year, that would help. But there's a reason why Florida State went heavy in that transfer portal and grabbing Fisk and Darrell. You got to find help. And you lost Robert Cooper, but Robert Cooper wasn't a pivotal player for Florida State's defense. He hasn't been. He'll hold on to a guy. He'll be able to take a guy, take two, just because of his size and strength. But you're not looking at a ferocious defensive tackle making a rush, or at least even being able to hold a run. And sometimes, definitely when Fabian Lovett's not in the game.
It's not just Oklahoma. Florida was able to dominate us too in the trenches as well. Actually, I was arguing with somebody saying that if Florida really wanted to win the game, they would have just kept running the ball. But thankfully, they started trying to throw the ball with Anthony Richardson. So like that blessed us a lot. So, but Darrell Jackson's coming in 26 pounds bigger than he was last year, and he looks better. And then as what God brought up, Joshua Farmer, that is a large kid. And both of them played. Every time I see them, I'm like, yo, y'all were teammates. And like, I want to go, when I go to practice tomorrow, I'm going to ask Boucher, like, how did y'all lose with both of those guys on the interior? I mean, they were big when they came in, but they made a concerted effort to try to get a little bit thicker to try to solve some of those problems. And if Farmer takes that step further, Malcolm Ray takes a step. You got Dennis Briggs that you just bumped in, Fisk. You got, obviously, if Fabo was able to play at the level in which he's played when healthy, the sky's the limit for that D-line.
Question coming in from Antoine about KJ Kirkland, Jarian Jones in the secondary. Both seem to be ahead of the curve physically.
I'm glad that the chat, they're on their A game. They're on their A game. Spring camp is officially back. That's for damn sure. KJ Kirkland, Florida State does a good job, and I think with some of the freshmen coming in, getting them a smooth process and then getting them acclimated quickly to practices. But KJ Kirkland is one that stands out a lot. He's the one that I continuously have to, at practices, look back at my phone and go to the roster sheet and say, who is in this number, because he is making plays. And he had probably the best practice out of everyone yesterday. Grabbed the pick and took it back for 6. And the size looks great. He's putting himself in the right positions, and Florida State needs that. Not that it's going to play a major role this season. Could see playing time. I think he could be a guy that we saw like Azare Thomas last year. 2 different type of players, but still one that you could be able to put into a game and not worry so much about it, at least for lesser opponents, blah, blah, blah. But Azare Thomas saw a lot of playing time against some good competition. So, but nonetheless, yeah, seeing that is good. And then, Jarian Jones, one that always gets harped on about, bad play here and there, but we don't talk about the good things about him. But he's one that always impresses in practices. So that's no shocker there to me whatsoever. And he should. This is a veteran guy, and he should flash, and he should continue to improve, because he does need improvement. But KJ Kirkland, we thought highly of him coming in as a high school recruit, but there's other names, and you've got the stars and you got the ratings and all that crap. But when it comes to competition, these guys are not shy going against some of the veterans that are on this team. And that's exactly what Mike Norvell is wanting to build inside this team's atmosphere around this whole program is don't be shy to go against the best competition. And I like how Florida State, at least this spring camp specifically, going against better competition, like Vandrevius Jacobs going against one of the top transfers in the country, one of the top corners last year with Ventrell Cypress. Make him go at him. Who cares? Just let him learn early on what's the do's and the don'ts. And there's a lot of accountability building between these guys too, which I like to see from just the true freshmen and newcomers. So KJ Kirkland, we'll continue to watch him, but he was in one of our reports highlighted there yesterday. He's looking good, and I can tell that FSU Twitter's talking about him quite a bit also.
Got our buddy Scott Davis in the chat. Defense will be fine, moving some players around in more depth. Losing J-Rob hurts, but oh well. Is Jamie Robinson the biggest loss on this team?
I mean, yeah.
I don't.
On defense,
he's been gone. J-Rob's been gone. He's been to 2 NFL teams since then. So Janarius is right, yeah. J-Rob.
But I think what you're going to see at safety is going to be different. I mean, I think they're moving some pieces around. You got, as long as what people don't realize, especially against Florida, and where the passing game got away from us in that first half, is Akeem didn't play. Like, he was expected to play. He took all the 1 reps, but then tweaked his ankle during the warm-ups. And now you had to put Shaheem Brown, who's extremely talented, but Shaheem actually plays more of Jamie Robinson's role in the safety as opposed to what Akeem did. So I think everybody's going to find out how good of a player Shaheem is, not just in blocking kicks for LSU fans. So you'll see that. Again, Kirkland's doing very, very well. A lot of guys are getting a lot of guys are going to be performing well. If you get good corner play and that D line is able to apply more pressure with the guys that they're able to bring in, defensive ends getting better, more pressure in the interior, I think you'll see the secondary be okay.
That was my bad. I was thinking Janarius Robinson. J-Rob, I always go out and J-Rob is always Janarius Robinson to me. Didn't really call Jamie J-Rob to myself. But yeah, Shaheem Brown, that's it. That's all you need to know. Once he's fully healthy and he's back good to go, I'm no longer worried. And I like how Akeem Dent is kind of stretching into things. And we haven't really talked about it as much, but Travis J. It was one of my guys, Mark. One of my guys that I was going to risk it for a biscuit and pick him to be a guy that kind of switches things around. And we'll see. But working with the ones, we'll keep an eye on it.
Okay. I like that line of thinking. Chris, who do you think this is a really big camp for? Obviously much is going to be decided in August, but who's going to set themselves up for August? Who needs to break out a bit?
Everyone. No, I personally think it's who Logan was just speaking on. I'm not familiar with the term risk it for a biscuit, but I am familiar with that's exactly who I put the highlight or spotlight around. That if Travis J shows the athleticism that he has, and he will step up in the safety position or anywhere really on the field, but definitely the safety position, that Florida State's limit as far as safety goes, we've got 2 very well-rounded safeties that can step in and do the job with losing Jamie. So I think that Travis J has the most to prove, where he was set back on basically the practice squad for the full year. And he has the opportunity now to practice with the ones and be that guy again. So I think that the question was answered before it was asked to me. And I think that's Travis J. I think he has to prove that he is that guy.
We have just dropped the link to Den Media Group right here on YouTube. That's James' venture. James, tell us a little bit about that and why people need to go there.
Well, a variety of different things. If you want some humor in your sports, you want some different opinions, you want some of my opinions fleshed out. Basically, that's what we do with Big Games BS. We have more things that we're going to be adding here, hopefully, but by the summertime, at least more shows, more behind the scenes things. Miles does a really, really good job with the editing, and our reels are going off really good. But the biggest thing is just real. So we're trying to get to, and we also like giving stuff away. So once we get to 2,000, we're going to give away $200 to anybody who joins, or excuse me, who's a subscriber, and you're watching the show. So it gives you some interest to subscribe and watch and tell friends. Every time we hit another 1,000, we give away 10%. So we'll do that all the way up to $1 million. But I'm not giving anybody $100,000. But I will break that up. But at the same time, that's I don't want the IRS to get you. Like you don't want all that kind of money, but like we're gonna bless people and do those different things. And if you're there and you like it, consider being a member. A lot of the tailgates that we do, and we have a spring game tailgate coming up. A lot of stuff that we do in the community, we're kind of going through the YouTube channel. So if you're a subscriber on 36 Mafia or higher, those things go directly to my book bag drives. All the money goes toward buying tickets, doing different things in the community for kids. So that's basically what we're focused on. I don't need any more Twitter followers. That doesn't do anything for me. But the subscribers on YouTube definitely does.
Folks, we can't make it any easier for you. Just dropped the link in the chat. You click on the link and you're good to go. Chris, what's going on at Spear Addicts?
Well, very similar to what James is doing. I'm trying to get to 3,000 subscribers on Spear Addicts. For some reason, we lost about 800 subscribers. YouTube did a sweep of thing, making sure people weren't bots, and how they go about doing that. So y'all pay attention to your subscribers list. So how they go about doing this is they think if someone subscribed to a channel, that if they get removed, that they'll just immediately go back and subscribe again if they're real. So if they can't determine whether it's a bot or not, because believe it or not, a lot of YouTube subscribers, they don't have their channel. They don't put up videos. So they can't decipher whether that's a bot or a person. So they wipe out X amount of hundreds of people and then expect them just to join back the channel that they just jumped off of. I had about 78 members contact me and say, did I stop them from being a subscriber? And I was like, no, I don't even know how you do that. So they all joined back, but I don't have all 700 joined back. I've got about 500 of the 700 back. So trying to get the subscribers up on YouTube. And tomorrow at 6, we're going to have Robert Scott on. Mark, I think you're going to be there. Logan, I think you're going to try to make it. So we have a Twitter space that's going on with Robert Scott tomorrow at 6 Eastern time. So if any of y'all are on Twitter, all you got to do is look any of the three of us up, and it'll be in blue highlight. Click on it. It'll take you to the space. And you could possibly come up and get a question in with Robert Scott.
Yeah, those have been fun to take part in. I appreciate that invite. That's cool stuff. Logan is not only all over Florida State football, but he's Mr. NFL these days now too. So he is Mr. Football, I guess, is when you add it all up. But he's all over the Bucks as well.
Yeah, just moved here last week and getting acclimated to everything. So if you are a Bucks fan, I know a lot of people followed for FSU, but luckily both mix very well. A lot of FSU fans, Bucks fans. But if you want to keep updated with some Bucks news, we're at Bucks Game Day on Facebook and Twitter. That's it for right now. Nothing else. There's a reason I moved down here. We got a lot of work to do on building this thing, kind of what we've done with NG, but had Baker Mayfield's press conference earlier this week that went well, and we're trying to bring a lot of coverage to the Bucks side of things down here in Tampa, get this thing rolling a little bit. So if you like that, and then also Florida State still staying very close and hands-on with everything going on in Tallahassee, and we'll be traveling up there left and right for all these things. But you can follow us at Knoll Game Day. We're also on YouTube. We have a show tonight at 8, going over some of the early standouts from spring camp. We'll talk about the Ireland game and a lot of other things. So if you guys want to hop on there, that's going to be at 8 o'clock for that show. And I think that's about it. We've got another show with Brian Stewart coming up soon with his Calculated Chaos, which will be episode 3. And if everything goes right, going to have to talk to a few people and make sure that we're cleared for it. But he's going to share some practice film, and it's going to be a lot of some trenches stuff. So I'm all about it. Sign me up for a lot of Timmy Jernigan versus Brian Stork. Sign me up for a lot of things. Mario Edwards off the side, LaMarcus Joyner, everything. So we might have to rate it R for that because there's going to be a lot of violence. But excited for that episode 3 coming up soon.
Yeah, you don't see that kind of stuff very often. So that's
if
a
it gets
good
cleared
look right there.
If it gets cleared,
cool.
it's all Jimbo's tape. It's all Jimbo's tape. So if he's gonna have a problem, then I saw they got a $200 million facility coming out soon there. Who knows if he'll still be there to be able to view that and work with it? But it is his film, so I might have an email from Texas A&M soon. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, good luck with that. They may want to save 200, maybe 50 million out of that 200 mil for a buyout.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
We're going to go big picture with Rod Farva here. He says, Ohio State fan here. What is the overall confidence in the state of Florida with the big 3 programs? Will we ever see them consistently ranked in the top 10 and competing for titles?
I think you'll see that this year. I mean, when you look at what Florida State returns compared to the rest of the nation, compared to their schedule, you would be kind of a hater if you didn't look at it and say that Florida State would at least at worst be considered one of the outside 6 or 8 that would be considered for the playoff, just based upon preseason accolades without games being played. Now, Florida, I think, has a more stable situation. Miami has a lot of pomp and circumstance, but they have good recruiting. But I think as it stands right now, Florida State is clearly above the 2 rivals. They, firmly beat one rival, and they're trending down. And the other one, they were able to beat with a potential number 1 overall pick and 9 guys that went to the combine. So, where they only had 1 guy on their roster go to the combine. So I think it's a matter of time, and it helps when you're in a base that everybody recruits. And what we do know is that when Florida State's hot and winning, they can recruit anybody. You could just look at the people who they've had visit and look at what the 2024 class and the 2025 class are trending toward. And I think the same thing for Miami and Florida. The key is to getting Florida State back to what they were with Jimbo. I had a teammate who coached under Jimbo. He made a very good point. When Jimbo was here, who left the state that Jimbo really wanted? And I'd argue nobody. Like, Jimbo got what he wanted, and the guys who left were guys that he really didn't want. And I think another season of Florida State playing, especially if they're able to push toward the playoff, next year, rightfully so, you will be able to see it as a down year, but letting 9 and 10 be the standard, and then you keep recruiting. I think Mike Norvell, both in year 5, will have Florida State really rocking to where they need to be at.
Yeah, I think it'll take a little while. Like James is saying, there's some other programs in the state of Florida that are going to take a little bit. Florida State has the edge on both of these programs right now, but we'll see we'll see a lot of things. I think the biggest question mark for me is maybe Florida at the moment. I think it's just going to take a little bit more. It's going to take a little bit longer for Miami, but they'll get there. But on the other side of things, I think Florida is one of my question marks going through the career with Billy Napier. I don't know. That's very questionable. I'm not basing off of really last season as much, but I'm just watching the offseason go and looking at some things from camp. Just want to see how how things develop for both of these programs. But yeah, Florida State's got the edge, and they're going to be the ones leading the charge for the state of Florida for at least a year or two. But Florida State's seen that. Florida State's been on the side where it's the other way around, and that's just kind of how the way things go. And Florida State had a really rough run for a long while. And, not saying that Florida State is now going to be fighting for playoff runs. They've still got a season to show us that they can beat good ranked teams. So we'll see. But for an Ohio State fan in here, congratulations. We're still got a ways to go here in the state of Florida.
Speaking of which, talking about more state of Florida Big Three talk, we're coming up on 7 Eastern, and we'll be on the Miami channel there talking up the Canes. So I know these three are happy about that. So
we don't have Jason anymore to rip them apart, and there would have been at least 20 minutes of Miami talk in here. I will say there would have been at least 20 minutes, but haven't had that. This whole thing right here, the last little bit, it would have gone to 7 o'clock about Miami if Jason was here. So we did a little bit of Miami talk, but not a lot of bashing. So
you don't punch down. You punch up.
That's right. At this point now, you don't do that.
Yeah, and Jason does love, because Jason lives there. It's like a little bit different vitriol for him to be able to come at them. But I can't argue with guys who don't like every year for the last 4 years, we've seen the same first practice highlight where the quarterback drops back, tries to throw a simple slant, and the wide receiver falls down and drops it. I can't, at this point, it would be like me saying, "Oh, I dunked on my son." Good for me. Good for beating up a 9-year-old.
I think Miami's biggest issue to overcome is can they coach their way out of it? Can they develop their way out of it? Like what a lot of people don't want to talk about, even Miami fans, is how talented that team was that could not put together a win. And they put together 5 wins on teams that they should have beat, but did they beat anyone that they wasn't supposed to? No. So Miami's biggest question mark is are these actual coaches or are they just recruiters? And right now they've shown nothing but the ability to recruit. They haven't shown any developments to where you could say that kid's gotten here and gotten better. In some cases, you would say that some of the kids came out of high school and got worse. So, for Miami, they have to figure out how to develop talent. You have to get the best out of the best talent. They don't just walk on the field ready to play college football and then they have all the answers. And I'm with Logan on this. Florida, I have a bigger question mark because they also had an extreme amount of talent. Like James said, there was 9 that went to the combine. Anthony Richardson could potentially be the first overall pick, but you made him look less than average last year. You couldn't set him up to succeed. You didn't set up Florida to succeed. So I don't think Florida State has the question marks that either of the other two have. If there's one thing that you could say that Norvell and them can do, that's develop talent, bring up names that people didn't know beforehand. The question that you have with Norvell and his staff is, can they recruit at a high level? I think the 2024 class is going to be the first proof of that they can. It's for me, not just being Florida State, but it's easy to sit here and look back and go, Florida State's head and shoulders above the other two. UCF is moving in the right trajectory, it looks like. Maybe they'll replace Miami in the Big Three.
So right at the end of your statement there, Chris, you hit it right where I am on this. And I've got an interesting vantage point because I pretty much cover all three to varying degrees. And I know you guys keep tabs on the other two as well as I do, if not better in a lot of ways. But I got to say, over the last 5 years, there's been a constant juggling of kind of power rankings between the three. I would say within the typical year, depending on whether they're actually playing football because it's September through November, or it's, just been a signing class just come in December, or whatever the issues have been off the field, and then also more commitments coming in. It's been this constant, like, who's the flavor of the month? Who's hot? Does Florida have the advantage? And for a couple months, obviously Dan Mullen had 3 tremendous seasons in a row. So for those 3 years, they were the best team. And Florida State was down under Willie Taggart and early in Norvell's tenure. But Miami, they seem to spike in recruiting, and they've generally had better recruiting classes or close to Florida, and FSU's been down. This is the first sustained, like you just said, Chris, this is the first sustained since about mid last season, when it showed that, Florida had a really nice early season win against Utah, and they had a couple decent wins against the likes of like a South Carolina. But other than that, they started to trend down mid-season on. Florida or Miami, like you just said, Chris. What was their best win last year? They were awful. Georgia Tech was their best. That was their best performance last year. Like, nobody else they beat was any good at all. Well, including Georgia Tech. They didn't beat anyone with a pulse. So once Florida State got their act together, and certainly didn't play horrible in that 3-game losing streak, ran up against 3 pretty good teams. But came out of it, started winning games, and now that trend has continued. So we've got a good 6 months of Florida State clearly being the best program in the state, and that's the most I've seen, other than, again, Mullen and those 3 good seasons he put together in the rivalry and the power rankings of these 3 schools in state. It's interesting to watch, but Florida State's finally taken over, and I don't see any end in sight, at least right this second.
I think the biggest thing is going to be who's able to be consistent. And that goes with your coaches. When you think about the only time that Florida State has truly been down is after we had to do something that we had no experience doing, which is have a coaching search. We kind of failed at one, maybe rushed it too quick. Right now, per last year, it seems like we're doing okay. We need another year to be able to prove it. But when you have it was a Florida athletic director that said this. When you fire a coach early, all you do is set yourself up to fire the next coach early. So when you look at what Miami's consistently done since Coker's been gone, you brought Randy Shannon in, you brought Al in, you brought Mark Richt in, you brought Manny, now you have Mario. And this isn't, I haven't been gone for 20 years. So that's a lot of coaches in a short amount of time. So it's hard to be great if you keep missing. Same thing with Florida. Florida has hired, we've gone from Zook, they caught lightning with Urban. Urban was really, really good for a second with Zook's guys. Then his heart started hurting when his guys had to play and he had to leave. Then you brought in a bunch of guys that just haven't added up. So there's been turmoil. So a coach brings in a new philosophy, new offense. And even with Florida State, you had Jimbo Pro style, big players. We're gonna chew up yards, but we're gonna play game management. Then you go to Taggart, who says, I want to run 120 plays in a game if I can. Completely different systems, completely different body types. And you have to recruit that. Then you also have to try to convert what's on your roster into that. Then you go to Mike Norvell, who's probably more middle of both of them. So now these players got to unlearn all these different things to really learn something else. And I think what really benefited Florida State is just being the team that doesn't have to keep replacing everybody. Look at what Florida and Miami have done this offseason. They had the same head coach, but they lost 60 to 70% of their coaching staff. Like, they had to replace. It's not that. So again, without games being played, without even using trolls or anything like that, one has to say, based upon the data that's here, it's hard to not say that Florida State has control and probably will move forward and past those guys if they can't keep it up. Because not only did Miami and Florida lose coaches late in the process, they weren't able to get their first, second, or third choice in these coaching staffs as well.
James, are you making me have to stick up for Urban Meyer? Am I going to have to do that?
Urban's a great coach. Urban is a
we brought in top 3 to 5 classes there,
right?
Like
but
consistently.
What happened? And that goes to the point. Urban can recruit phenomenally. Urban in the SEC though had a season where he dipped to 8 wins again, and he lost that stronghold to Florida State. He realized he didn't have the elite quarterback play that he needed, and he got out. Here's why I say I joke about his heart. Because he went to go, Mark, you're super busy right now. He went to go work for y'all when you were at ESPN. How easy is that job being an analyst? Like when you travel on Thursday through Sunday. Like he basically became a college coach that just talked. Like he did nothing. He said he wanted to stop so he could focus on his heart, watch his daughter play volleyball, and spend more time with his family. For people who don't know, in the state of Florida, do you know what days volleyball plays their games? Tuesdays and Thursdays. He was every Thursday. He was at ESPN's college football, like covering that game. So you're missing more of your daughter's games than you did when you played. I mean, than when you coached the Gainesville. But he comes back to Ohio State, does a great job. Urban, all jokes aside, if we could have figured it out, I might have forgiven Urban if he wanted to come to Florida State. But I'm also going to get these jokes off because of what he did to Jacksonville. We saw what he did here in Jacksonville, but I don't blame him as much as I blame Jacksonville for trying to force somebody to be good at what they're not.
Well, no doubt. And that's why I will never defend Urban Meyer off the field. It's all football anytime I stick up for him and what he's accomplished, because, you know, the on the field versus the off the field are two completely different resumes. No doubt about that. All right, folks, appreciate you all being here. We got 3 of the best, and so I am blessed. Definitely. So we got Chris Frazier from Spear Addicts. You got to join him and everything that they're doing over there. It's phenomenal. We will leave the link in the chat again. And Big Game James Coleman, he's here as much as he can get here. And this guy's busy, busy, busy. He makes time for us each and every week. Hope you appreciate that. Get on over to Den Media Group right here on YouTube. Do it. Just as soon as we get done here. Den Media Group. Right here on YouTube. We put the link in the chat. It's easy to do. Get on over there. And then, of course, our guy, Logan Robinson, Noel Game Day. Talk about busy. He's covering the NFL. Baker Mayfield's making him work these days a little bit extra. And he keeps up on Florida State at the same time. That's tough to do. So, Logan, we appreciate you being here as always, man.
Appreciate it. Going from Tom Brady to Baker Mayfield is something else. It definitely is. Organization down here is very interesting, but looking forward to what Baker brings.
Absolutely. Folks, appreciate you being here. Make it on back next Wednesday. Bring a friend or 2 or 50 with you next Wednesday at 6 Eastern, and catch Logan tonight, 8 Eastern, right, Logan?
Yes, sir. 8 o'clock.
Noel Game Day right here on YouTube. Catch it, and we will see you next Wednesday.